Thank you so much to all of you for coming out today and hearing my talk about how analytics can make you a better editor. So yes, I'm going to be talking a lot about website metrics, which sounds like it could be pretty boring, but I promise to do my very best not to put you to sleep. So what do I mean when I say analytics that can make you a better editor? Well, what I'm talking about is data about our online audiences that tells us all about them. So it tells us how big the audience is, where it comes from, what it likes and what it doesn't like. And it's all about how to look at this data and get practical uses from it. So I want you to walk out of here with practical strategies for using this data. And I really want to encourage you to look at this data to learn more deeply about your reader, because that's what it really is about. I do think you'll get some ways to grow your online audience, but I also want you to use analytics as a way to take some time and reflect on past work you've done and how it's performed and what you can learn from that in future assigning. And I think understanding analytics really thoroughly is also about finding ways to work more efficiently, to work smarter, because there's a lot of lessons in those numbers. So who am I to talk about all this stuff? Well, as you just heard, I'm Carley Fortune. I'm the deputy editor of Shadowlands. I'm kind of the second in command editorial person there. And I do a lot of different things in my role, but digital strategy is a really, really big part of what I do there. Outside of the office, I'm a new mom. I'm actually currently on maternity leave. I had a son in November, so I was really looking forward to having this morning to spend with adults, not looking after a baby. It's so great to see all your faces here. I have a bit of a diverse background, I think. I've worked in print and digital. I've worked in magazines and newspapers for daily, weekly, and monthly audiences, and for audiences both locally and nationally. So I'm a bit of a Jill of all trades, I guess. I started out at Toronto Life magazine quite a long time ago now as an online editor, and it was a really interesting time to be there. When I started, we were producing just a handful of pieces every week on the website, and in the course of a few years there, online publishing became such an important part of what a magazine does. We were kind of producing the same amount of content in a day as what we used to do in a week. And from Toronto Life, I went on to The Grid. May it rest in peace. For those of you who don't know what The Grid is or was, it was a weekly city publication here in Toronto, and I was the life editor there for a time, a wonderful time. And it was a really, very much a print role, so the web had kind of nothing to do with it. And it was all about how words and photography and design work together to tell a unique story. So there's a lot of attention paid to how pages came together and kind of using print for what print is best for, which was a lot of fun. And then after The Grid, I went to the Globe and Mail as a life editor, and that was, again, another print role and very, very traditional kind of daily newspaper editing. And then from the life section into the style section as the deputy editor, which is a weekly section and more of a magazine-y kind of role. And I'm telling you about all of this because I want you to know that I love both print and digital very, very much. And I understand the challenges of both. But most of all, I think both kind of work together quite nicely. And I'll talk about that a little bit more throughout the presentation. My goal today is to convince you that analytics are your friend, your Phoebe or your Chandler, if you prefer. It's, I know, a very topical reference. And what I mean by this is I think that a lot of us still feel kind of skeptical about analytics. We get reports, barrages of numbers, and sometimes it just seems like just a whole lot of information that's not very helpful. And other times it's really disheartening. If you work on a piece that you've put a lot of care into, whether you're a writer or as an editor, and it gets 50 clicks, whereas a colleague's lesser piece gets 5,000, it's really frustrating. And what I love about analytics is that it puts these numbers into context, and it's so often it doesn't have anything to do with the quality of what you've produced. And analytics really lets you see the bigger picture behind those traffic numbers. And even better, it might help you to kind of predict that this scenario would have occurred. And if you use analytics to your advantage, you could maybe do some small tweaks, even just to the headline, that would have helped your piece without making any kind of drastic changes do really well for you. The other reason I really like analytics is because I find that they're a fantastic source of ideas, and I think we all kind of trade in ideas. And I think when you start kind of looking really carefully through the numbers, you get lots of sparks for what you could be doing, how you could change things, new ideas, and I really like that. I think that's really valuable. A caveat to this entire presentation is that you should feel completely free to disregard them when you want to. I don't think a publication can run solely on the numbers. I think your readers are savvy enough to know when you're doing something just for the clicks. A publication that's run by the numbers doesn't really have a lot of heart. Analytics work when you combine them with all those other great editorial skills. And it's really all about balancing, using analytics as a part of your toolkit as an editor, not letting them rule things. And I think what I say is that you shouldn't feel too free to disregard them, because I think we're probably more likely to get that big report of numbers, look at it very quickly, and then move on, instead of kind of digging into it and using it to our advantage. The other thing to keep in mind, I want you to know that I know that traffic isn't the only measurement. It's not the only measure of success. There are a lot of ways you can define success in journalism, and the numbers aren't the only one. So keep that in mind as I talk today. So as I said earlier, I think that print and digital worlds can live really nicely together in a publication, in an office. And the reason I think that is because the editor's role is essentially the same, an online editor's role and a print editor's role. And that is to assign and refine stories that are relevant to the reader. The difference with the web is that the reader has way more power to tell you exactly what they think is relevant. And so it's our jobs now to listen to them. And part of the way to do that, kind of the best way to do that, is by using analytics. So it's good for the reader if editors are paying attention to analytics, but what's in it for you as the editor? Well, today it's kind of smart. It's smart for you to be analytics savvy. You're kind of more desirable in the job market, and that's because I think that it's very rare to have those fantastic editorial skills for being able to write a great headline or do a great line edit or smell a great story when you know a story is perfect for your audience. It's rare to have that in combination with a love of analytics, and so if you have both those kind of puzzle pieces, you're a pretty special gem, I think, in this business. As I promise not to bore you, so I don't want to talk about metrics and UVs and page views too much, but I want to give you kind of a quick note on them, and how do you decide what metrics you should be following, what metrics matter, whether uniques or page views. Well, it's determined by two things. The first is your editorial priorities, so the kind of content you produce. You know, if you're putting out a lot of long, in-depth features or just kind of, medium-length pieces, you might be interested in how much time your readers are spending with those pieces. If you're producing a lot of galleries, for example, you might be more interested in page views. So are people scrolling or clicking through all of your slides? Are they deeply engaged with them? If you are more interested in kind of luring people from Google, if you're putting out a lot of evergreen service content, then you might be more interested in visits and uniques. You know, what number of people are you actually pulling in? And what metrics matter is also determined in part by your business objectives. So what's being monetized? Is it page views? Is it time spent? That makes a difference too. So what are they good for? I find that uniques are good for just giving you kind of an overall sense of how something's doing, whether it's the traffic to the site overall or whether it's a piece, because it's just the sheer number of how many people have come to it. So that will let you know. Probably if you have a good number of people to a piece, it probably is telling you that you had a pretty good headline on it. It's also telling you that you probably put it out at a good time, or the way that you put it out was working. And it probably tells you that that's the kind of content that people are looking for. Page views, on the other hand, tell you if your site is sticky or people moving from one page to another. And as I mentioned, whether your galleries are keeping people interested. And time spent, great measurement of engagement. Are people staying with your features? When somebody clicked on your piece, did you give them what they wanted? Is this what they're looking for? So today I'm going to talk broadly in two categories of two ways of using analytics. One in the day-to-day work as an editor, so in your editorial planning, in your assigning, in your headline writing, and the other way is how to bring analytics into kind of bigger picture brainstorming, into strategic decision making. And one note before I start is if you don't know how to use your analytics program at work, don't be afraid. These things are very, very easy to do. They take time, but they don't require a lot of training. So, if you aren't sure how to use whatever program your publication is running, ask for an hour or two of training to find out the basics, because you can certainly get somebody to pull this information for you, but I find it's really empowering to be able to just quickly look up something yourself. I use analytics to answer questions a lot. So if I have, how did that thing do that we did last year? We're going to do that thing again. Let me just quickly look up how that thing did. When you are able to work like that, as I said, it's empowering. You'll get a lot more out of analytics. So first up, analytics for everyday editing. So these are suggestions that any editor, especially assigning editors or section editors, can use in their day-to-day work. It's all about spotting trends, really. It's about looking for trends within the numbers. And it's also about reflecting on work that you've done and learning from it for the future. It's pretty easy. You only need 3 things to do these things. You need a list of your top stories. This can be a list. I like to look for the past year. What are my top stories for the past year? If you're a section editor, you might be looking at the top stories just for your section, or you might be looking at the top stories for your site overall. The number of stories depends on the volume of content you produce. So it could be 100, 200 stories, maybe it's 50 stories. And this list is an absolute goldmine. Second thing you need is quiet. As I said, this involves trend spotting and reflection. So you're going to be going through this list with a highlighter and looking for similarities in stories and thinking back to these stories that you've produced and how you put them out, what they entailed, and if you get interrupted, your flow is totally ruined. So you're about to have this like aha moment, and somebody comes and knocks on your door, and you forget about it. So it's essential to do this in a distraction-free place. I usually do this kind of work from home, or I do it in the morning before anybody gets there, or in the evening when people have left, because I think it's really important to give yourself some headspace, some like nice thinking time. Lastly, you need coffee. Or you need to do this when you feel really fresh. So if you're a morning person, do these things in the morning. If you're an evening person, start later in the day and do them in the evening. And the reason why I say this is because looking through lists of headlines and numbers is really, really draining if you're already tired. And if you're not, if you're feeling good, I think it's kind of exhilarating work, actually. And I think you would too. So the first thing that you can do is figure out what subjects your readers love. Now, you probably already know that because you know who your audience is, but I'm talking about really, really digging in specifically not just my readers like health, what about health are they interested in? Really digging into it. So you take your list of top stories and you look for any trends. So you're looking for the people, names of people, companies. You're looking for subjects that consistently show up. So, for example, if you're a fashion editor, you may notice in your list of 100 stories that product launches about H&M. There's some that show up like 3 times. You notice, hey, there's H&M, something new that H&M's doing. Oh, there's something new that H&M is doing, and think, hey, clearly our reader is really interested in what this company is putting out. Maybe I need a consistent plan for covering these launches, and so it kind of sparks ideas like that. The other thing that you're looking for with this list of top stories is low-hanging fruit. So what I mean by that are subjects that you don't cover very often that actually perform well. So I call it low-hanging fruit because it's clear that if you start covering these things more consistently, that's what people want. People are going to read them. One example at Shadowlannes is books coverage. So we put out in the fall a fall reading list, a fall books guide, so kind of the best new releases in the fall. And it was incredibly, incredibly popular. And we didn't do that on a consistent basis. Sometimes we did a summer reading list, and then we did our fall reading list. And so we were like, you know what? Obviously, our reader is really interested in great new books. So we started a monthly series. It went in print, and it goes online as well on the great new releases. And it does well because we know from looking at the numbers that that's what people wanted. And the other good thing is it works with the kind of content we want to be putting out that kind of really works with our mandate. Lastly, in this list of top stories, you're looking for any surprises. So subjects that you didn't really know people were so interested in, they'll jump out at you as you're looking through. Something we found at Shadowlannes, and I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about Shadowlannes a lot. I apologize. Those are my best examples. Something I found at Shadowlannes was that we published a few gardening stories, and oh my goodness, the traffic that these gardening stories got was very, very surprising to me because we didn't have any kind of real plan for covering gardening, and so we've done that because there was clearly a desire to know about gardening. Please stop me at any time if you have questions, by the way. So the second thing you can do with that list of top stories and a way to use analytics in your day-to-day work is figure out how best to package your stories. So when you're going through that list of top stories, now you're looking for what kind of story formats are working, because now you know what your superstar subjects are. Well, how are you going to cover them? So when you look through that list, take note of what formats are doing well. Is it a Q&A? Are they tips and tricks? Are memoirs really popular for you? Are they photo essays? And I find this really helpful because it gives you ideas for how to cover topics. There's so many ways you can cover something. Going through this exercise and saying, you know what, our readers are really interested in memoir. It gives you ideas for what else you could be doing for your reader. If you're a personal finance editor, for example, you may notice that a piece on saving blunders does really well, like personal saving blunders, that does really well, and say, you know what, people are interested in personal finance mistakes, and assign more pieces like that. And then something else you can do is figure out how to write better headlines. A note on headlines. Headlines are incredibly important. Unless you're blessed with producing the kind of stories that your readers read no matter what. So if you cover the Maple Leafs, you're probably guaranteed to get a certain number of clicks on what you do. For the rest of us, your headlines have to work really, really hard for you. But they're difficult to write, and we often write them at the end of the editing process, or we're putting something up from a print publication and we're trying to figure out how to sell it for the web. But it's so important to take that time, and a good headline can save an underperforming story. So your story that got 50 clicks, consider just putting it out again with a different headline on it. It really makes a difference. So using that list, just look at the headlines. Look at the headlines, and do you notice anything? Do you notice any trends? Are there any words that seem to make people click more or less? Is there a tone that seems to turn people off, or that people seem to be into? Do they like celebratory headlines? Do they like just straightforward, blunt headlines? Does sarcasm work for you? You may see things like how to achieve something in a certain amount of time. So your service articles that have a time limit on them, how to clean your house in under 30 minutes, that does really well for you. And are there styles of headlines that work for you? So questions, for example, is a question really good for you? Is a number really good for you? I'm not saying that you default to these styles of headlines when you're writing headlines. I'm saying that headlines are hard. So if you keep a list of ideas for like headline types that seem to work for you, when you're stuck, you can refer to it and help you out, spark an idea for you. So keep that list handy. What you can do when you have all this information, when you've learned about kind of the subjects that work for you, when you've learned about the headlines that work for you, the formats that work for you, you put it all together, because you've just done an incredible amount of research on your reader and their habits. So it's about using that knowledge to make really smart editorial decisions. So let's say you're the editor at a shelter publication, and you found that stories about organizing are really popular with your reader. That's a subject that resonates. And then you find that they're especially popular if they have a time limit on it. Like I said before, how to organize your home in 30 minutes or less. And the other thing you found when you looked through the list of your top stories is that DIY projects are not doing very well for you. So what do you do with that information? Well, you simply may just want to increase the number of organizing stories you do. That's pretty simple. You can also apply what works best about your top stories to your underperforming stories and see if they perform better. So like the time limit seems to be working for you. So 5 DIY projects you can do in under 30 minutes. Or you could even add the superstar subject in there. So organize your life with 5 DIY projects that take less than 30 minutes. Like, I guarantee you that is going to do very well for you. And it probably also aligns really nicely with the mandate of your publication. This is one of my favorite ways to use analytics, and that is in planning editorial packages. I really love packages, both in print and online. And I think a lot of us are producing packages, often annual packages, kind of signatures for the brand that you do every year. This exercise is about looking at, when you're planning for this year's package, look at last year's and see how it performed. It's pretty simple. So let's say, for example, you put out a fall entertaining guide every year. So it covers movies and books and dance, etc. And you dig into the numbers on all the stories that you put out in that package online, and you see that the story about what to watch on on-demand TV was the top piece. That was the best piece last year. Well, this year, you may simply just want to cover that more TV in your fall books package and come up with some new ideas to do that. Or you may want to do the entire guide, scrap fall entertainment, scrap that, and do an entire guide about on-demand TV and different ideas within that. Or you may keep your guide the same as you did the previous year because it's working for you, and instead think, you know what, we're just going to cover on-demand TV more regularly because our readers clearly like that. The other way you can use analytics in your packages is when you're doing a new package, is to do some research, and if you're doing a new package about TV, you've never covered it before, you can dig into stories about that subject that you've done in the past and see how they've performed. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. Okay. So here's one that many of us do, which is the annual gift guide. Let's say you are planning this year's guide. What you would do is go back to last year and look at, a lot of us do the gift guides as galleries. So you would go back and look at the different galleries, or the different, whether it's gifts for mom, gifts for dad, gifts for him, gifts for her, and figure out which ones did the best and which ones did the worst. Just compare the traffic on them. And let's say you find that gifts for mom was the most popular last year. So you may want to expand the number of gifts in that category this year. Or you may decide to just do an entire guide, maybe it's online only, devoted to giving gifts for mom. So gifts for the health nut mom, gifts for the foodie mom. So that's another way that you can use analytics in packages. If you have an idea for a new guide, you can use analytics to kind of build out your case for it. So let's say you're a food editor. You are looking through your list of top stories and find that 3 of your top 10 food stories are about French food. So you say to yourself, aha, we should definitely do a French food guide. And then you can dig a little bit more closely into the different stories you've done throughout the year about French food and figure out, is it the French cooking technique that people like, or is it certain recipes or their regions that people are really drawn to kind of help you develop your plan for the package. The other way you can use analytics when you're thinking about new packages is to help you win an argument. So let's say you're trying to pitch this package to your editor. If you come to them and say, listen, I want to do a guide to Gilmore Girls because 3 of the top 10 stories in my section for the past year were about Gilmore Girls. And even if your editor doesn't like Gilmore Girls, they're probably far more likely to agree with you when they're presented with the numbers. And I love winning an argument. So I wanted to give you a kind of a real life example with Chatelaine's beauty list, which is a guide to the best new beauty products that we do every year. And we've done it in a whole bunch of different ways. And this year, last year, when we were planning for the 2017 gift guide, we decided that we would make it we would assign it with digital and print top of mind. So in the past, it had all been about the print issue, and then it would go up online. So with this, we're gonna plan with both are equally important. And the way that we did that basically is we developed categories that we knew would work for our audience, and we knew that because of analytics. And with that in mind, we were, the beauty editor, the style editor is also looking at the trends for sure. But then she has this knowledge about what our audience really likes. So when she's thinking about how to kind of frame those categories, she knows what our readers are interested in. We decided to also pick categories that we could blow out throughout the year. So this was going to be, when we put it online, was going to be just one big gallery with different sections in it. And each section, we decided to pick ones that, later in the year, we want to do more natural beauty products. And with that in mind, we shot the art with digital in mind. So we use really graphic images that we knew would look great on the website, they would look great in the newsletter, and they could be used throughout the year as well once we expanded those galleries. We promoted it online way later than the print issue came out. So it went up online at the same time as the print issue, but we didn't promote it online until we knew when our online audience would be most interested in it. So we waited to roll it out on social, etc. And it worked really, really nicely. So the uniques were up 170% over the year before, and it had the most page views of any piece so far this year. Okay, so those were ways that you can use analytics in your day-to-day work. These are ways that you can use them in more big picture thinking and strategic decision making. This takes a lot of time. It takes some time to dig up the numbers, but it takes more time to kind of really think about it. And as I said before, giving yourself the space to do that is so important. These are things that maybe a more senior editorial staff or the editors-in-chief, deputy editors want to do. And they're really to help you figure out where to put your energy. We all have so much to do with less. It's a total cliche, I know, but it doesn't make it any less true. So anything that can help you prioritize where to put your people resources, where to put your time, where to put your money, I think is really valuable, and we should pay attention to. So this is something that can help you with that. So you want to figure out what matters, what really matters to your brand. This is really about setting priorities and identifying those key areas of interest for your reader. And you probably already know this sort of. We're a health publication. Health is really important to us. But this is about drilling down a bit more deeply into the main sections of your publication. So the main sections of your site. Chatelaine, I'll try to remember them. It would be food, style, home decor, health, life, and news. So what you want to do is take those your main sections, and figure out what % of the site's traffic does each of these sections get. Put numbers to them. Put it on a pie chart. You might know that cars is your biggest section, and that real estate is your smallest section. But until you really put these numbers against them, you don't really know exactly what's happening on your site. And I've definitely found surprises doing this. So it can be a surprise that a section only gets 13% of the traffic, or that it gets 60% of the traffic. And why you're doing this is you're looking for you're looking for help to determine where to spend your money. And that is different for all the publications. It's different for what you're thinking in terms of your strategy. So you're looking for opportunities as well. So you're looking for areas where you're getting a large volume of traffic that you're not assigning a lot of content for. That if you started assigning for, you could maybe really boost things. And you're looking for areas that you could grow. So maybe you look at your smallest section and you go, oh my gosh, we could do way better than that. Let's invest some money there, or let's devote an editor's time more to growing this. Or you may say, you know what, this isn't worth our time. We've been spending a lot of effort trying to grow this section. It's not really working for us. We've tried everything. So, we're going to deprioritize this. What that pie looks like and what you do with that information can be totally different. But it's so helpful. One of the things that I found at Shadowlands when I started there that was a really big surprise to me was that the health section was enormous. It was one of the biggest sections on the site, and I was surprised partly because we weren't really assigning anything new to it other than that what was going in it from the magazine. So this was clearly a key area of interest for our reader, but one that we weren't really giving a lot of love to. And so we definitely changed that with our online strategy and with our video strategy as well. So another thing you want to do when you're making big decisions about how you work is know where your traffic comes from, because this is like the other half of the puzzle for publishers. What you produce is obviously incredibly important, but how you get people to it today is it's essential to get this right. This is how you get your readers, and it's doing this exercise will really help you work more efficiently and figure out what you should spend your time on, whether that's search engine optimization or social media or your content partners. So what you do is you look at all those different traffic sources, so your newsletters, referring sites, social media, etc., and figure out what percent of the site's traffic comes from each. And you put it on a pie chart, excuse me. You can do the same. You probably do want to do this. You do a separate one for just social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest. So you want to break that down further, because this is really useful for your social media editor or whoever is manning your social media feeds, because there are so many to keep on top of which ones are most important to you. This is also great for determining how important SEO and evergreen content is to your content strategy. So are you getting a lot of people from search? So search engine optimization is probably important for you, and producing those evergreen pieces is probably very important to you. You can determine, if Facebook is sending you the bulk of your social traffic, you may want to, pull back or automate what you put on Twitter and concentrate on Facebook. Or maybe not, you may not be getting a lot of traffic from Pinterest, but you still may decide this is important to us. This is our readers really engage with us here, and it's not about getting traffic. It's about having a different place for our readers to interact with us. Those decisions are for you to make, but it helps to kind of go through this exercise and really think about what you're doing and why you're doing it. An example from Shadowlands is our newsletters, which are incredibly important to us in terms of traffic and engaging with our readers. And so because of that, we decided to increase the number of mailings that we put out. We also kind of ramped up our sign-up program because we know that once people get our newsletters, they're opening them, they're clicking on them. And we also decided to spend a lot of time on them. So we spend a lot of time thinking about subject lines, and we spend a lot of time thinking about the lineup of newsletters, and that's because they're important to us, and we've consciously made that decision to do it. So sorry? One of one of the kind of fun things that we did was offer like a freebie incentive. So this was around the holiday time, and what we on social media and different places where we were promoting our newsletters, even on our own site for sure. We said sign up to our newsletter and get a free digital holiday cookie recipe book. So this is a PDF. Recipe book that was produced, fairly painlessly. Certainly work is required, but was a really great incentive for people to sign up to our newsletter. So that's one way, as well as promoting them on social media and on our own site as well. Yeah. So another thing that you want to do is take the temperature of your site. And what I mean by this is just figure out how things are doing. And, you might know, like specifically Facebook is up this year, or, you might know little bits and pieces of information, but I'm talking about really looking at the whole site and figuring out, is traffic growing year over year? Is it growing month over month? And doing the same thing for each of your sections. So looking at each of your sections and seeing if it's growing year over year and every month, and doing the exact same thing with your referring sources. So with your traffic from Facebook and Pinterest, is our traffic growing from these sources? Is it shrinking? Is it flat? And what you're looking for are any emergencies. So any places where you're declining in traffic that you did not know that was happening, and that's a problem. And you need to address that immediately. This happened at Shadowlands with our Pinterest referrals suddenly started tanking, and it turned out that it was a technical problem, but we wouldn't have found it if we hadn't gone through this exercise, and it was remedied quite easily. You want to look for places where there's good growth or sharp growth. So this might be something new that you've been trying and is like really spiking in growth. And that suggests to you that you're on the right track, or maybe do more of this, please. Or you may also find that a very large, important section, so at Chatelaine, let's say it was the health section, you may find that it was declining in traffic. And this is going to be a big problem for you, because a large volume of your traffic is from this section. And if it's not doing well, your site's not doing well. So you need to kind of readjust your strategy there, create a plan to boost it. So that's a lot of stuff to do. So when the heck do you do it? I find time once a year to do what I call a deep dive. So this is where I take a few days, I work from home, and I do all of these exercises that I talked about. And I'm looking for everything that we talked about. So I'm looking for our top stories for the whole site. I'm looking through them. I'm looking through them for each pillar. I'm looking at our referring sources. I'm looking at our growth. Are we growing? Are we shrinking? And I spend a lot of time and with a lot of pots of coffee doing this. And I find it's really valuable. I also, after I've done this, I write a report about the site. This is what's really working for us. This is what's not working for us. Any ideas I came up with, and I do the same for each section. So a little report on each section, so that the health editor knows that the social media platform that's sending her the most traffic is Pinterest. That's valuable information. She knows that a certain kind of story is doing really well for her. And any kind of areas of opportunity, so things that we can bring into our annual and monthly planning that have come up from this. This is by no means the only way that we think about how to work, but it's one of the ways. It's one of the ways to get ideas and to refine how we're working. And I meet with each of the teams to talk about it afterwards, and kind of go through everything, because there's undoubtedly surprises and really interesting bits of information. So we also take the time as a team to go through it carefully. obviously you aren't going to check your analytics only once a year. There's lots of other times when you check it. And I think that this is kind of what makes analytics overwhelming. There's so many numbers, and they're coming at you all the time, and how, like, when do you do it, and what are you looking for, and how do you even make sense of it, and how do you find the time? So I think it's really important to look for certain things at certain times of the day. So you're kind of like scheduled in that way. So real time, this is maybe the most overwhelming or most addictive way to check your numbers. You're just kind of looking, I kind of just use it for quick, immediate feedback and get a really like quick sense of how things are doing. Your online editors, if you're separated into print and digital editors, probably want to be looking at this for any kind of spikes, immediate spikes to stories. Let's say an older story is suddenly doing very well, then you might want to make sure that it is full of links to other content on your site, or has video on it if getting video views is important to you. It also gives you, if you're just kind of like checking in now and then, it just kind of gives you like a kind of a natural sense of what goes on your site. So generally when people are there and when they're not there, or generally in the evening they tend to look at this kind of story. So it just kind of like informs your how your site does. I don't try to like spend a ton of time looking at it, just kind of quick glances. My favorite time, though, to look at real-time analytics is after our newsletter goes out, and that's so I can see, did our subject line work? Are people clicking it on what was in the subject line? Did our lineup work? And because you've just put it out, you kind of get that immediate feedback. Every morning, I go in and look at yesterday's traffic, and this is to kind of inform myself while it's still fresh. I'm very familiar with yesterday's traffic. I know what these stories are. I know how we've rolled them out, and I want to see how they did, just kind of quickly, not a lot of like agonizing over this. And sometimes it sparks an idea for a follow-up. That did really well, and I think the story still has legs. Let's follow this up. Every week, at the end of the week, I also look at traffic, just the week's traffic, and this is to think about it a little bit more. What did well, what didn't do well, anything that really stood out or surprises. It's really good for short-term planning. So again, things you may want to follow up on, or like things that went really, really badly, and you need to kind of remedy that next time, whether it's in the headline or something else. And this is good for like getting some information that you can share with your team. Every month, at the end of the month, I look at the month's traffic. How did this month do to the previous month, and how did it do to the same month last year? So if I'm looking at May's traffic, I'm looking to see how April did, and I'm looking to see how last May did and how they compared. So are the same things really popular? What really stood out? What worked well? Is there anything we can take away from that? Any kind of assignments we can make? Are there any trends? Like what can we learn from this information, basically? So how does this kind of affect our everyday work at Chatelaine? Well, it kind of comes into play with everything that we do. Like analytics are a big part of our conversation. So we're always kind of talking about the numbers. And they're really very much incorporated into our monthly planning meetings. So when we meet to talk about our digital and print lineups, the editors know if we're talking about May, they know what typically does really well for them in May. They have their list of last May's top stories. And that may mean that we're going to make sure we cover off some of those topics. It may mean we're not. It may mean we're doing something totally different, but it's always part of the conversation. So it's just kind of like naturally brought in, and we all know. And it has affected our print designing as well. So, let's say I don't remember what month it was, but there was a gallery that we often did a recipe collection of cheesy pastas, and it was always popular at a particular month. There was a particular time of year. People really wanted to eat cheesy pasta or make cheesy pasta. And we hadn't done any of those kinds of like comfort food baked pasta recipes in a long time. And we thought, you know what, this is a great opportunity to develop some new recipes, to get some beautiful new photographs, and to put it out in print, because that clearly people want it, and that, works with our mandate, works with what we want to do. And it will do, like our online audience really wants that as well. So sometimes there's a really nice overlap there, and everybody's kind of happy with those situations. We more and more, and this is always tough. We're trying to assign print and digital at the same time. So if we're assigning a package, like I talked about the beauty list, we're trying to talk about all the elements at the same time, so that it's not kind of the old school situation where you put out something in print and then your online editor looks at it and goes, how do I put this on the website? These photos don't really work for me, or this little bitsy piecey thing it's not going to work online. This chart doesn't work online. So we're trying to think of everything at once, and it's not for the purpose of making sure everything goes online. It's just being thoughtful about what we produce. So if we know that we want to shoot something in a particular way, and that our social media editor wants a particular kind of image for social, and we know we want a particular kind of image for the web, we can talk about that all at once and come up with a really smart plan. Something that worked really well for us doing this way was a big package that we called This Is 40ish, which was a survey of 1,000 Canadian women. We've done it twice now, asking them like nosy questions about every part of their life. And we got back so much data, and then we had to figure out, how are we going to put this into a package for print and online? And typically, with those kind of survey results, you would design a really cool package for print, and then the web editor would scream, because those highly designed packages are very, very hard to put on web. So instead, when we were meeting to talk about this package and how it was laid out, we laid out the web version and we laid out the print version at the same time. Because it was, it just made it so much easier, and it wasn't about print does one thing, digital does another thing. It's how do we give this really great content to our audience in all different places? Because that's what it's about, right? It's about reaching your audience. Yeah.
I'm curious, did you connect the two? So that with the print, did you say go online and find X, Y, and Z, or was there an incentive to?
So did we connect the two? Did print relate to the web? I'm trying to remember whether there was a throw or not to the digital package, and I honestly don't know. And the reason I would guess that there was, just because why not? It's probably not wouldn't have been crucial to us that there were. Digital had video, so it had more, and it had a fun layout, but it's just about reaching your different readers in different places. So we're not necessarily assuming that our print reader is the same person who's accessing it through Twitter, clicking on it and then finding it. So that wouldn't have been as important to us as making sure we're giving our print reader a really great package, we're giving our web reader a really great package, and we're trying to access our readers from different points. So we're trying to get them from Facebook, we're trying to get them from Twitter. That's kind of.
So would you have tracked the throw then?
Would we have tracked the throw? No, we don't track print throws for sure. And we've really, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I think this is right. We've limited how many throws we do from print to web. Mainly because we don't take the time to track it, and that information is probably not that valuable to us, but mainly because we just acknowledge that the overlap is probably not as great. It's probably not so big that that's valuable anyway. There's certainly overlap, but it's probably not that valuable. Yeah. Hi. Okay, so what are the differences in photography styles for print and for digital? And how do we assign for that? Definitely not my area of expertise. Our creative director is probably, it's definitely better able to speak to that than I am. There are different sizes though that work. So print is obviously portrait, and web is often landscape, and different social media platforms have different sizes, and our newsletter is they're square, so you have to take that into consideration when you're shooting for sure. And also like sometimes really detailed illustrations or really detailed photographs, they don't work that well as little newsletter images, so kind of more graphic imagery works, but it's not my area of expertise for sure. Yeah. Anybody else? Hi.
Do you ever do like in a newsletter, do you ever do A/B tests where you have like one subject line for half the audience and half the other subject line for half the audience?
So are we A/B testing in our newsletters? No, and man, I wish we were. It's a bit of now I haven't been there for 5 months, so it could have changed. As I said, I'm on maternity leave, but it was a bit of a more of a manual process to A/B test when I was there. It wasn't really set up for really clever A/B testing, which is when you create the same newsletter with 2 different subject lines. It gets sent out, and it kind of monitors itself, and then with a small group of readers, whichever subject line is doing best, the rest of the readers get that email with the stronger subject line. I would love that for sure, but we don't do that. So it's all about paying like close attention to what we do for our subject lines and then seeing how they did. So the click rates really tell you how a newsletter subject line did really, or open rates, sorry, did people open this? Yeah. Hey.
I was just curious, you mentioned that during the discussion about the web scarcity, where there didn't seem to be a lot of overlap between the print and digital audiences necessarily.
That's my guess.
Yeah. Does that affect how you assign the website versus print, or is that something that you guys figure out?
So does an overlap between print and digital affect how we assign, or well, okay, so if assuming that we don't have a ton of overlap between print and web readers, which is just kind of my feeling, I don't have numbers on that to be clear, does that affect how we assign for web? Yeah, we will definitely put things up online first before we run them in print. And we will put things in the print magazine that are older, we'll have pieces that have been doing well online, and we'll say, hey, that did really well online, let's put that in print. So that kind of affects it that way. It's more liberating. We're not too worried about that. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. So we, as I said, we're just talking about how we incorporate numbers into our work life at Shadowlannes. We meet annually to talk about those kind of deep dive results and just big picture conversations. Great place to talk about ideas, ask questions. I send a monthly note to each section after I've kind of looked into how the month did with, hey, this seems to be doing really well for you. Here are your top stories. This didn't work out so well. We could try it like this, just so they're getting kind of constant feedback. I also send out what I call a weekly wins note on Fridays, which is just kind of a rundown of great news stories from the week, like what did well for us, whether it's on social or not, or just like a really cool story that we did and why that may have done well or what was so interesting about it. Just kind of keep that conversation going, and it's kind of a nice way to end the week as well. We also meet every morning. We call them our morning scrums, and we do a quick digital production meeting. So this is talking about where our stories are, where the art is for them. This is about kind of bringing digital into part of how we work. So it's editors from all parts of the publication meeting, and we're talking about the day's headlines. Are there any stories for us there? How do we want to cover them? And we're also talking about what's like doing well for us. So we're always bringing that into the conversation. And it's working out really well for us, I think, and we're showing some good growth, which is always nice. And really, what I want to stress is that this kind of talking about it all the time, talking about numbers all the time, bringing it into your conversations, is really the secret ingredient to using analytics. So it's not that you get blasted with just a list of your top stories. It's just bringing analytics into the discussion. Okay, we're going to talk about comfort food. What comfort food recipes are really popular online? Let's just talk about that. We're not going to let that dictate what we do, but it's just a part of the discussion. And you want to encourage people to, when they have questions, like when they're planning their packages, to use analytics as a source for getting ideas. So it's not just what's in the news. It's not just the trends. It's also what are our readers telling us. It's just part of how we work is we check up on our analytics. It makes it a little bit less intimidating, I think. Really, like your job, I hope what you will do when you're done this presentation and go back to your teams is try to convince them that analytics are their friend. That's everything. Thanks. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
How integrated are your print and digital teams? Do you feel like it's still has to push really hard to digital?
So how integrated are our print and digital teams, and do we still have to push really hard to integrate digital? They're totally integrated, in fact, and no, I would say no. We don't have to put. I think we've got to a really nice place of making digital a part of the conversation, and it's no longer kind of the neglected baby sister or the pain in the neck. I think people are genuinely excited about what we're doing digitally, and part of that is that they're getting that information, that like immediate feedback of, hey, this did really well. Our readers love this. This resonated, and it's partly just kind of part of the culture there, that digital is exciting, and it comes from the top down. So everybody's on board, and if you weren't on board, it would be a problem. So that would be the anomaly, is if somebody were really not into digital at all. Yeah, but I don't find that's the case. Anything else? Okay, thank you so much, everyone.